Well, we're back. Okay. Yeesh. Let's see here. I should be able to see the new stream over in YouTube Studio. It says it's connecting. Connecting software. Live, and I'm looking okay. Bjorn is back. I have none of the stuff I had before. Oh, well, you know, I'm going to have to add stuff to the checklist. I apologize. Bjorn, I apologize to you, my friend. So everybody's still here. Well, most everybody. Everybody's good. How's it look? Yes. Yes. Looks good. All right. Let me break out the chat here. I emailed Bèvé the new link. He has that as well. We're back on StreamYard. All right. So, yeah, it's 5 Watt World. As somebody said, if it was 50 Watt World, we wouldn't have these problems. So thanks to everybody. Thanks for the help, as always. I'd like to follow the format that I usually use, which is to run over some things that that came up after the stream ran, which is always a cool thing that I get, contacted by people. Bjorn and I were talking about how one of the fun things for me about running the channel is that I get to meet people like him, but also I got contacted by some interesting people this week. Thanks all, Grendel. I appreciate that, man. There was actually a top chat in the other one too that was asking about the Crazy Tube Circuits pedal. We'll come back to that. We got that one from the last one. So the Blatt Strat, hold on. I think people assumed that I had this from before for the live stream, but in fact, I did the video based on information that I had from Gilmourish and from articles in Guitarist magazine from years before. So everybody voted that I should go ahead and do this. This book is out of print. I was able to find a really clean copy. It's absolutely beautiful. Phil Taylor wrote this. Phil Taylor is his guitar tech, as you might remember from the video, or maybe you knew before the video came out. And he's been his guitar tech since 1974, which I think is just incredible and beautiful in a way. I think that some people, when I do stuff like this, often I'll have people correcting me or having things that they think, I always encourage people to cite where they're getting that from. I can always tell you where I found mine, right or wrong. Everything I can tell you came from someplace good. And, really, in this case, a lot of it came from Bjorn's website and from reading it over the years and then referring back to it. I also had a very cool exchange with a guy named Jason Allen. And Jason Allen used to run a website where he bought and sold vintage guitars called Virtual Vintage. And among other things, Phil Taylor reached out to him back in 2010, asking him to organize replicas made of the white Strat, the 0001 Strat. And replicas were made. And, I didn't even see this in the show, but in the Christie's show, one of those replicas was sold. And the replica of the 0001 Strat that was built by Fred Stewart, who was one of the master builders at the Fender Custom Shop at one time, that guitar, the replica, sold for over $93,000. The cool thing about that back and forth that I had with Jason was I kind of expected when he reached out to me and said, you had some of this wrong in the storyline. And I was taking it from the Christie's auction and stuff. Come to find out, the Christie's paragraphs were actually from information that Jason supplied to Christie's. And Christie's edited it and made it much shorter. He actually was able to share with me the provenance of those guitars and was able to backtrack in Southern California and found that white guitar was built as part of a pair of instruments that were built and given to two brothers who were in a band out there. They built that white Stratocaster and a white bass, precision bass, and both of those. And if you know anything about early Fender history, that's a perfect MO for Leo Fender, that he would do that for a band and, you know, and do something to get people's attention. So it's very interesting. It was really cool. And if you go on the Christie's auction site still and look under Fred Stewart and the replica, the white Strat replica, you're going to find that some of that history there. It was very cool. And it was really interesting to hear from him, as I said. Well, we're behind schedule here, thanks to my technical difficulties here. So I'm going to, I emailed Bèvé. I can email him again, actually. Let's do that. So I can invite him from here. There he is. He's there. Cancel that. So let's get Bjorn on the stream here. There he is. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Much better. I should have listened to you earlier when you said it was glitchy. I thought it was a Wi-Fi thing on your end. I apologize to everyone, and I stand corrected. So Bjorn, thanks so much for being here to do this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I owe you an apology right out of the box, I guess, because the beautiful music that I spent so much time downloading sounded terrible, I guess, on your end, and in the end, everybody ended up hearing. Is that true?
Yeah.
I apologize. You have my humble apologies. I will promote the record shamelessly as a way to make it up to you. I promise. I absolutely promise. And that's easy to do because as I said to everybody, I really enjoyed listening to Bjorn's music this afternoon. And I'd listened to it in the past. It's just been a long time. And I was really glad to have an excuse to go through it again. So, Bjorn and I were talking when we were doing the testing earlier, and I asked him, you know, what things did I get wrong? What should have been maybe expanded on? Were there guitars we wanted to talk about? So you were talking about the Esquire, the 55. You want to share that with folks?
Yeah, I think it was the Esquire that you mentioned that someone came back to me and commented on the claim that it was put into storage, which is it's not wrong because he got the 83, 84 reissues. But the guitar was used on his solo album and on some guest appearances throughout the 80s and early 90s, including the Paul McCartney album and a couple of shows. So I think that the 55 has been with him, at least in the studio and some sessions, but also on stage throughout the 80s and 90s.
Cool. So he did end up using that. He used the butterscotch Telecasters as well. People talk about, sometimes they'll call a 52 reissue a broadcaster reissue. I think the headstocks actually say Telecaster in most cases, but he used those as well. Yes.
Yeah, he did, and I think he got one of those maybe two among the guitars that he bought in early '84, prior to the About Face tour. Most of the guitars were Strats, including the blonde and the red Strats.
And the cream.
And the cream, yeah, the blonde or the cream, yeah. But he also got a second butterscotch in '94.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
I wanted to ask you the red Strat, which honestly, I was listening to him a lot in that period of time as well when he's playing the red Strat. I've seen it listed as an 83 and an 84, and just based on logistics, I said in the video that I thought it probably was a late 83. Have you ever heard of anybody that like took the neck off and actually, do you know definitively which that is?
No, but I think it's an 83 because according to both David and Phil and the receipts from that purchase, they date to, I think, January '84.
Yeah, right.
So guitars must have been made late '83 or summer '83, I think.
Right, but I think I've seen in lots of places that it's listed as an 84 because it was purchased in '84.
Yeah.
But as you just said, it was really early in the year.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And over time, I should have asked this before we came a camera. Over the years, you ever talked to Phil Taylor?
I haven't actually. He's been commenting on my site and through others, and I think he's using a red pen and going through everything. And I get some emails from others, but I did actually talk to him at Albert Hall a few years back. I think it was maybe in 2006 or something. He knew who I was, but he was busy, and I think
You're sort of busy.
he was quite busy, and to be honest, I don't think he really cares. Neither does David about my site or any other stuff that's out there. So
not the conversation.
No.
I don't know where I heard this over the years, or maybe I dreamed it. So I remember when you did the review of the Boonar.
Yep.
And didn't David use those for a while, or is he using them now? And just for everybody knows, the Boonar. So what's the specific model I'm talking about? A Benson type delay pedal.
Yeah. The Boonar is based on the Benson Ecorec. Yeah.
Right.
And I did a review of that when it came out a few years ago. I think it was in 2016 or 17. And a few weeks later, I saw him using that one in his rig. Probably not because of my review, but it's nice to see the gear, and that is also exploring new stuff, and which has also always been sort of his thing and Pink Floyd's thing with guitars and effects and keyboards and stuff.
Yeah. So you've been. When did you go down this rabbit hole? I mean, like, when did this start for you? You want to tell your story about like the first time you heard Dark Side or all that thing? I think people would love that. I'd love to hear that.
Well, I grew up listening to bands like Black Sabbath and Kiss, which are still some of my favorites. And I think it was in the late 80s or something that I borrowed a copy of Animals from my older sister. And that was pretty much it. And Animals is still my all-time greatest album. I around 96, 97, when I was just finishing high school, me and a couple of my friends started a band together, and we were all Pink Floyd fans, and it was only natural to learn some of their songs, which sort of evolved into us doing a Pink Floyd tribute act. Mm-hmm. So we were touring around in Norway and Scandinavia playing. And we wanted not to do the hits or to sort of become a show band. We wanted to go down into the bootlegs and the live recordings and sort of try to recreate those old shows. So we didn't play a lot of Dark Side of the Moon or Wish We Here. We did Animals, and we did all the Live at Pompeii stuff, and we did Atom Heart Mother and some of Sid's things as well. And this was early, so still in a period when internet was pretty young and there wasn't much info out there. So I started to gather as much information I could to sort of learn my stuff and to collect gear that I could use in the band, which sort of led me to create the site, which was back in 2003, I think. So it's 20 years next year.
Wow. And it's interesting. You said a minute ago that your favorite record is still Animals.
Yeah.
Not Dark Side.
No.
How come?
I don't know. To me, it's I love Dark Side of the Moon, but I have to be honest to say that it's a bit overrated. Yeah. My Pink Floyd albums are I Wish We Were Here and Metal, Animals, and also growing up in the 80s, I have a huge fondness of Momentary Lapse of Reason.
Yeah, I do too, actually. Yeah, and actually, I would tell you that the record that really resonated for me, maybe because I could play like the opening chords of Mahalis, was the first solo record.
Yeah, sure.
I remember people on the channel will remember that, like, my rig coming out of college was a Tele Deluxe, like probably a real 72 Tele Deluxe, and a non-reverb Princeton. And I had I think it was a Univox, really was a faux Leslie pedal And I just would go like up. I grew up on a farm, and that was upstairs in the hay barn. I would just have the whole thing cranked up and play those chords over and over again until my family made me stop. Which they were very good about it. So anyway, well, that's very cool. That's cool. So we had a couple of questions. Let's do questions. Oh, Mr. Beato is here. Thanks for being here, Rick. And I saw Jeff is here as well. That's great. And a lot of familiar names. And Angus was here earlier. Maybe we lost Angus. Let me scroll back to the Alt Grendel. So did you see, Bjorn, when we were up before, did you see the question about the crazy tube circuits? Somebody was asking about a crazy tubes multi-pedal that's around the sounds from Floyd. Are you familiar?
No.
No? Really. Okay.
I saw a question about the Pink Flow.
The Pink Flow?
Yeah, from Jam Pedals.
Oh, okay, that's what it was. I'm sorry, I got it wrong.
Yeah.
So what is that? Is it a Univibe thing?
No, that's a.
You look around like you've got one.
I have it here. I did a review of that a few years back. It's a huge pedal, a multi-pedal with I think it's 6 or 7 of Jam Pedals that they put together in a multi-unit. I think it's the Red Muck, Big Muff, Tube Screamer, a delay, a Ripple Phase 45, and a chorus, I think. I think it also has a reverse wah-wah circuit.
So what's the flanger?
No, I don't think there is one, but the chorus, the waterfall, can easily be tweaked to both sound like a chorus and or a flanger.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Somebody asked, Gerald from California, says, Gerald, California here, what happened with the big headstock? I assume he means what happened with the big headstock neck that came off the Strat live at Pompeii. So that was when the black Strat was new, before the neck was changed. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that's the same, that's the black Strat. Maybe somebody answered this for him later. The big headstock, he says he thinks it's important, but nobody talks about it. I think that's, yeah, Tim Walker then answers, he said that that's covered in the book. But, you know, I don't know how many, do you know how many of these they printed?
I have no idea, but there's been several versions of it.
Oh, have there?
Yeah.
Reprints? Maybe this isn't her first edition. I paid too much.
There's been no updating it so frequently. So
they do?
Yeah.
They do put it out again? This one came out in 2008. It's the second edition. It says so. So 2007 was the first edition. So, and it actually, they cover the Strats before the black Strat. And then, and you were reminding us all that when some of the guitars were put away, actually the black Strat, that's when it went to be at the Hard Rock Cafe.
Yeah.
And why did David go get it again?
As far as I can remember, I think it was Phil who wanted to bring it back. David had been using mainly the Candy Apple Red 83 reissue for most of the 80s and 90s, and I think it was Phil that wanted to bring it back, and it was I think it was used for the 99-98 Paul McCartney sessions. But and they had some work on it because it apparently it had been hanging in Hard Rock Cafe in Dallas, I think, without any protection.
Yeah, I heard there wasn't glass on it, and that knobs were pulled off, and that people basically were able to handle it.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the scratches and the dings and stuff on the guitar is from the Hard Rock Cafe.
Wow, that's
but obviously the big return or the comeback was the 2005 Pink Floyd reunion, which I was lucky to see.
Cool.
So it was pretty amazing standing in the Hyde Park and realizing that the black Strat was back.
All that history.
Yeah.
When did he put because the neck? So is the neck like an early Fullerton reissue neck, the one that's on it now?
I have to go back to my notes, but he's been switching that neck a few times. I think the last neck that he has on it, or maybe the one before that, but one of the last necks is from one of the blonde or the white 83 Strats.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it was one of the 83s, the
Yeah.
Fullerton, whatever the Fender Fullerton reissues or
Yeah.
Fullerton Fenders. Yeah, the 83s.
He switched a few maple necks during the 2005-2006 on an island period, and I think he settled with a neck from one of the blonde guitars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had some great. Rick gave us a nice big live chat, top chat. Thanks, Rick. And Fix Pedals just gave us a generic Shazam. Awesome as always, and a nice big top chat. Really appreciate that. Somebody wants to know Umaguma 78, very appropriately named here for this stream, wants to know if Gilmour used AC 30s along the years for recording.
He might have. It's impossible to know just what he used in the studio. Obviously, he's mostly been using high watts and Fenders. I don't recall seeing him using a Vox amp, but he might have. Yeah. I know he used one with his former band Bullet.
Right, so, right. That was he used a Vox, or he had a Selmer then.
No, he used a Vox.
He's a Vox.
Selmer came with Pink Floyd as he borrowed Syd Barrett's gear.
He's using Syd's gear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Mammoth George is telling us that I think the 4th edition, the paperback of this, is available. So I think we have established that I probably paid too much. So we're good. The other amp that I didn't see anywhere, like as far as recording and stuff, but you see in interviews when it was at the BBC interview where he's on the barge, right? And he's holding a 50s Deluxe. But I never heard of him, using that, or he never talks about using it. And there it is. Like, that's the one. It's sort of like his living room amp or something.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's a practice amp.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's in recent years, or since the mid 2000s, with the recording of On an Island, he's mostly been using different Fenders and Alessandro amps.
Alessandro.
Yeah.
So Alessandro Fender copies of Fenders?
I think they are. Yeah.
Okay.
He's been using them mostly in the studio, but also together with the high watts on the last tour.
Yeah. One of the things I didn't have time to talk about in the video, because it really is a video about the guitars, but people asked about it in the comments, was the Ampeg FB2, which is the preamp that he used. And it seems like it was used at times as a tube preamp for just the Yamaha 200 rotating speaker. And it also was used at other times as a preamp to just power amp slaved high watts. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, again, I have to. It's been so many years since I did research on this, but yeah, it's an alembic, not an Ampeg.
Oh, sorry, I misspoke. Yeah.
But he's mostly been using that as an preamp for the Yamaha, which he started to use while recording Animals in '76. It was used on the Animals tour, the Wall tour, and also now present on the Rattle at Lock sessions and on the Endless River sessions as well. Cool. And as far as I know, it's sort of a Fender style preamp. It's been modified as well to have a bigger headroom and stuff.
Right. What I've read about it is that the circuit is based on the preamp in a Fender Showman, which was always designed to be a really high wattage clean amp. And it was funny because I made this video on the heels of the video about Keith Richards' chain of gear over the years, in the early years of the band, and they switched from AC 30s, which I think everybody here would agree are very loud. But theirs is before PA. They went to Showman amps with single 15-inch speaker cabinets, just because it's going to move so much more air around the stage, and they were 85 watt amps, so with basically twins without reverb. So very cool. Yeah. Right. I saw John Cordy go by. Mr. John Cordy is here. Bjorn, I wanted to note to everybody, Bjorn's record link, BV's put it in the stream here. Everything to Everyone. Talk a little bit about about your band and like if you've got plans now, hopefully to tour again and making this record? When did you do the recording? How many pieces in the band? You know, et cetera, et cetera. Because you said you were recording today. You said your hair was messed up from headphones.
Yeah, I'm using headphones all day.
Right.
Right now, I'm working on demos for the new Airbag album, which is really my band, or our band. The album that just came out is my fourth solo album.
Okay.
That I recorded, mostly wrote and recorded prior to the pandemic. So it was done a few years back.
Are the guys from Airbag also on your solo records? The same drummer?
The drummer is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then are you playing the bass parts and keyboards and stuff?
There's a few guest appearances, but I'm playing most of the other instruments, yeah.
I really enjoyed, when I was listening to it today, I was really enjoying the textures that you got. I listened to a lot of film music, cinematic, you know, sort of Icelandic guys, the Olafur Arnolds and all those guys. And I was like, oh, this is definitely in that, you know, milieu with much more of a hard edge. Yeah, I thought the sounds were beautiful that you got there. So
thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, it's really great. So when you're working on a new record for the band Airbag.
Yeah.
Okay. And then do you play out regularly? Are you touring? What's the plan? What are you usually doing?
Well, we haven't been able to, obviously, for the past few years,
right?
And it's still a bit uncertain. I mean, we're not a huge act, so the promoters is trying to recover from the pandemic, and all the big bands are doing their postponed tours. Yeah. But we're looking at possible dates for the fall and this winter. But obviously, we'll be spending much time in the studio recording the new album as well.
Cool. I had a request from somebody here wants to know. There's a couple of questions that went by, so let's get these. Somebody was asking, how important was the TC 2290 for his guitar sound? That's funny. I don't think of the 2290 as a big part of it as much as the MXR, but of course, it was before the MXR, yes?
No, the MXR came around the Animal Store.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the 2290 is sort of doing much of the same thing, but more of that stereo thing that he used in the 80s and 90s. Right. So I think for a lot of the dotted 8 things and stuff that he recorded on the Momentary Lapse of Reason and Division Bell albums, I think he used the 2290 a lot on those albums, as well as the MXR.
And when he got those, it seemed like the delay times got much longer as well at that time. Yeah. He's using a pair of delays at different times, and then they just got quite a bit longer. And maybe, I don't know, they don't seem bigger to the extent that they're not mixed more forward, but it's really interesting.
No, not really. I mean, the Benson in the 70s was mixed very high.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's sort of creating more of an ambience sort of effect. But I think if you look at how he sets up his delays, and still do with more pedals and stuff now, he's always going back to those multi-head Benson tones. Right. That unit had a maximum time for about 300 milliseconds. Now he's sort of up in the 600 and 700 milliseconds, but again, he's going back to those Benson sounds, combining 1 or 2 or 3 delays. Yep. And the longer delays also gives him more sustain, I think.
Yeah, right. So you make it a kind of a cloud of sound, especially on the ballady things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody was asking, when you were talking about your band, your current band, what your current rig is. Like when you go out and gig, does it vary wildly? I mean, somebody else was asking if you're going to come to North America again.
Yeah, I hope so. When we do these fly-in gigs, I always borrow amps. I try to use high watts or Marshalls or something British. That's what I am familiar with. I use different pedals. I think in the more recent years, I'm going back to the old Marshall tones. So I'm using a lot of Marshall pedals and amps. But I've been using high watts for years, and my guitars are mostly humbuckers on stage.
Yeah. So the clip I was watching from Quebec, you were playing a Hagstrom.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Which is a lovely guitar.
Yeah.
Really nice, and it's very light as well compared to.
I was going to ask, is it heavy?
No, it's very light.
Is it chambered?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is. It has some great pickups, and I was sort of looking for a Les Paul, but I found that one, and I thought, well, it suited my needs more, and a great alternative to a Les Paul, which I have too many of. So I think I'm using humbuckers a lot on stage. At least it gives me a more variety of tones, and I can always. It's easy to come to a stage with a different amp and just plug into a Les Paul. I think with humbuckers instead of single coils, which are a bit more dependent on which amp you're using.
Huh. Gilmour has said, kind of, at least at one point along the way, that he thought that playing single coils, it was easier to sound like yourself, which I thought was an interesting thing to say. He thought it was easier maybe to have the nuances of your playing come through with single coils instead of humbuckers. There's a lot of humbucker players that I really love, like Robin Ford and stuff, who I think of as, of course, Robin pulls out his 60 telly, and then sometimes I can't even tell it that's the telly instead. He just gets such a big fat sound. But you're not doing, it's not like you're doing a Gilmour thing anymore. This is your stuff now. This is your tones, the tones that are in your head.
Yeah, it is. And again, I grew up listening to classic rock and all those bands. So I find myself, the older I get, the more I go back to those those bands and those sounds. But I can understand that David is sort of relying on single coils, and that he probably feels that it gives him more, allows him to be more expressive. But I also think he grew up listening to Strat guys.
Right.
And one of his biggest influences is Hank Marvin.
Right.
And Jimi Hendrix, which was one of his contemporaries. So and for me, I can pick up a Strat, and I can play differently on the Strat than on a Les Paul, which I think it's common for most guitarists. So I don't feel that I'm expressing. That I can express myself less on a certain guitar. It's just different.
Yeah. And since when you travel, so when you're playing locally, you tend to take a high watt or a Marshall. You said you're into Marshall tones more now.
Yeah, but I think, well, it's not the same amp, obviously, but if you're using those old Marshalls, you can get pretty much the same.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then actually the clip that I was watching, they gave you a rectifier and a Fender cabinet. So I imagine you do what you can do. What's on your pedal board to get to your tones that you're looking for?
I've been using the tube driver for years.
Right.
I have a couple of those, and I like to experiment with different modulations. I love the Electric Mistress. I've been using that one for 20 years, I think. And one of my favorites is the Dunlop Roto Vibe. I'm a huge Zach Wild fan as well, and he's been using that for some time.
Okay.
I use compressors. I always bring different types of overdrive. Some that are scooped, some that have a more mid-range, and a couple of EQs as well, to be able to use different amps and to be prepared.
Oh, okay. So once you get your backline, then you can dial from there.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. At least with the overdrives. Yeah.
Right. Whiskey Romeo wants to know, is the Butler tube driver only important with clean amps? What stock amp would emulate the sound of the Butler that the Butler gives him?
Sorry,
he's asking if there's an amp where, if you weren't going to use a Butler,
yeah,
what kind of a tone is he trying to get with the Butler? Now, Gilmour used pedals into a big clean platform as well. Yes.
Yeah, his high watts are clean, or at least cleanish.
Yeah.
They're always, if you look at the settings, and I've been playing high watts for years, and I experimented with a lot of things and different tubes and stuff, and I think what he's doing is driving the amps very hard, the pre-stage of the amp, so he gets that sort of tube saturation, but they're clean, but you get that compression. So and he adds pedals on top of that, which is sort of on the opposite side of what Hendrix used to do with adding his fuzz pedals on top of a crank Marshall. But I think the closest amp to a tube driver is the Plexi.
A Plexi.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when I think of tube drivers, I think of Gilmour, of course, but also Eric Johnson, and right into the front of a Plexi. I mean, Plexi has always been right at the heart of Johnson's tone.
But to me, when you play really loud on the high watts and you drive the preamp stage a bit and you add a tube driver, you get that really compressed high end, and that's sort of soggy, if that's a word, low end. Yeah, that you get from a Plexi.
Yeah. When you're doing, do you do club gigs at home, or are you always in theaters, bigger spaces? Do you carry a 50 watt? Are you carrying a 20 watt? I see you got I can just see the corner of a Reeves back there. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's my Reeves.
Okay.
And there's a Laney Lionheart on the top, which is my recording rig.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Great. For a long time.
Yeah, it is. I'm mostly, when we do club gigs, I'm mostly using a 20 or 25 watts amp, which is more than enough.
Yeah, it seems to be the sweet spot.
Yeah. But for for theaters and bigger venues, I like to use 50 or maybe 100 watt, but 50 is usually enough.
Yeah. Somebody was asking if you had a chance to use any of the Nordvang products.
No, I haven't.
No? Okay. I know Jeff was on here earlier. Jeff actually has used the Nordvang stuff, both their fuzzes, but also their Klon style circuits. So let me go back here. We got a lot of hellos, Northwest Montana, folks from all over. One of the things that was cool, I had somebody who's a regular on the channel emailed me, and he sent me, all it was one of my favorite moments, and it was a photograph of him wearing the black Strat at the Christie's auction. I guess if you were at the level where you could get into the Christie's auction, they would put the guitar on you and take your picture. And all I wrote back was, "Is that?" And he wrote, "Yes, it is." That was the whole email exchange. So back and forth. So let's see what else we got for questions. Somebody's asking which amp would be louder, a high watt or Fender twin reverb. I assume he means 50 watt high watts, but I mean, you're talking about a 100 watt amp versus an 85 watt amp with a very different sort of EQ curve altogether. Yeah. Did you ever hear, was he using modified Fenders, or were they straight, I knew they were heads, right? He used twin reverb heads as well as combos, right?
Yeah, he did. He used mostly Fender amps in the 80s.
In the 80s, right?
On the About Face tour and the Momentary Lapse of Reason tour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, one of the things I learned going through your pages was I didn't realize the way the Mesa Boogie got added, basically as a preamp only kind of a thing, as part of a loop in the pedal board. It's like the world's biggest overdrive pedal was kind of the way they treated it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It was very interesting. I'm looking for more questions here, folks. Whiskey Romeo says he thought it was a Blues Junior on the barge. Seemed small. Yeah, a real deluxe, a 50s deluxe is a pretty small amp. Somebody's asking questions about the Jazz 3 picks. Is that what Gilmour uses? What kind of picks does he use?
He's using different picks. He's mostly using Herco, I think.
Hercos?
Yeah. Heavy gauge.
Somebody said that the black Strat is his parts caster. So Gilmour fuzz face question, BC 108 or a BC 109?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? I think for me, it depends on the amp and the pickups. I think the 108 is more responsive it has a bit more, to my ears at least, a bit more low end.
Mm-hmm.
The 109 seem to be a bit more saturated and have a bit more gain. But I think it depends on the amp, and also obviously how the rest of the pedal is designed, and the selection of the transistors and stuff.
Yeah. Angus Clark, who played in the video, says that he has a set of David Allen Echoes pickups, and he knows that you swapped out the bridge for a Duncan. Do you still have the dual sound bridge feature that David Allen bridge pickup had?
No, I have that on one of my guitars, but on my main Strat, I have two Voodoo 69s and the neck in the middle, and a SSL5 in the bridge.
Cool, thanks. So we got a couple questions about specific solos. Rhett Scholl is here. Thanks, Rhett. Thanks for coming by. He says, have we covered Gilmour's tone on Time, the lead tone on Time? Do you know what that was played on?
On the Dark Side album?
Yep.
Yeah. There's different sources on that. I think Alan Parsons, who mixed the album, claims that he used a Fender Twin. From what there is a Fender Twin on some of the shots from these sessions, but to my knowledge, and the footage that I have seen and interviews with David, it seems to be recorded on a high watt, but it could be a Fender Twin.
And then
the guitar was the Black Strat.
The Black Strat.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
With a fuzz face and the Binson.
Yeah. And then the mother solo on the wall is a Lewis. Is that the Lewis?
No, I think that was the Black Strat as well.
Black Strat as well.
Yeah, with a big muff and into his main setup for that album, which was the high watt and the Yamaha.
Right.
Yeah.
Stephen Brazil gives us a top chat and says, thanks, Keith and Bjorn. If you were able to have one of Gilmour's guitars, excluding the collection, I guess excluding the ones that are sold, I guess is the ones he kept. Is that right, Stephen? Which would it be? I know the answer. Why don't you go ahead?
Well, one of the few guitars he still owns is the 55 Esquire.
Yeah.
But as much as I'm not following the rules here, but as much as I love the Black Strat, the red one has always been special to me.
Yeah. I was going to break the rules too and say the red Strat as well. To me, that was the color. And those were the years when I was listening to those records where that was the guitar he was playing on stage. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I got some more questions here. Jeff says I should ask Bjorn which fuzz I should use. And he knows what we just had a whole back and forth about fuzz because I use a J-Rocket Hooligan, but really dialed down as a mixer, kind of like he did with the Big Muff and a Color Sound, so he's mixing them together to get that. So I know Jeff's busting my chops there. Thanks, Jeff. Always good to see you. I can't do a good job with this name. Tigve Yata Haivang says, Bjorn, what has been your favorite venue to play at so far and why?
There's been so many different stages. I mean, we've been traveling to a couple of cities in Holland for some years now. We know the venue, we know the crew, and it sort of feels like playing in our own city. So I have to say Helmond and Sotomir.
Nice.
But it's also great to play here in Oslo to our
your hometown crowd.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
Pat Metheny always talks about how he's doing like 200 gigs a year, or was, and he said that you get like 2 or 3 magical nights a year, and all the other gigs are you're chasing that.
Yeah.
So have you ever had a gig where it just felt like the whole thing, you were in the zone and it flowed and it was just there? And it could be recent, could be a long time ago, whatever,
We had an interesting gig in November, which was the first gig we had since the pandemic.
Sure.
It was a small place here in Norway. I think there was about 300. It was packed. But it was just an amazing gig. We were so ready for playing live again, and the audience was electric, and it reminded us so much of why we're doing this and why we love playing live and to experience live music.
That's great. That's great. Chris Quinn wants to know how he typed DH, but I assume he means DG, uses the Boss EQs after the muffs.
Mm-hmm.
So how does he do that? What's he doing with the EQ after the muff? Is he tightening it up, the bass, or what's he doing with that?
I think he's mostly tightening the low end a bit. He's adding a bit of mid-range, a bit of high mid-range presence, and he's cutting the top a bit, which is sort of the same thing he does with the tube drivers. Which also, if you look at the whole rig, he's using vintage style pickups, which are fully scooped. He's using the high watts, which has a lot of presence, but not as much as a Marshall. And both the tube driver and the big muff are flat or a bit scooped. With the EQs, he's adding in that mid-range again and the presence, which brings all of his tones closer to a Marshall Plexi, I think.
Bob Kaiser says, your site, and he was talking to you, your site makes an argument against big muffs for Fender-style amps. What do you recommend instead? Does a muff with boosted mids work well, e.g. the new Keeley Moon Fuzz that I think just came out this week? So
I have one on the way, so I haven't tried it yet. But my claim is towards David's tones. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with a Fender amp and a big muff. There's tons of great recordings with that setup. But the Fender amps are usually quite scooped, and the big muff is scooped as well. So what David does, combining the high watt presence and mid range with the big muffs, that's what's creating the smooth tone of the big muff. So I would, if with a scooped amp, whether it's a Fender or something similar, I would go for something like a Rat, maybe an OCD or a Rat, something in that sort of mid range boosted high gain stuff.
Yeah. The fellow who I did such a bad job pronouncing his name said he also lives in Oslo. I think he was looking for you to say what you said, which was the local gig is always a great thing to do. He added that in here.
Yeah.
Terry Banks adds the same thing we're saying, is that cleaning up the mush. That's the thing. TCM, does Bjorn have any modern guitarists who he thinks are really exciting? So people you're listening to, or are you just wearing out your Kiss records?
Mostly. I don't really listen to a lot of modern music. I mean, I should, but I don't. It's David Gilmour, of course. One of my earliest the guys that I listened to was Tom Iommi. Billy Gibbons is a huge inspiration. But it's everything. Steven Wilson, Joe Satriani,
Steve Wilson from Porcupine Tree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stephen Rowdery from Marillion.
You got some contemporaries here.
Yeah.
Somebody says here, Chris Smith wants to know what your favorite DG live tone is and why, and his favorite is live in Gdansk.
Okay.
What's yours?
Mine is Oakland Coliseum, 1977.
1977.
Yeah.
That's great. How come?
Well, there's just something special about that show to me. It's the Animals album. I think that show is the band at its peak. For me at least, and his tones on that tour is just amazing. I think he went a bit overboard on the following the Wall tour with a bit too much modulation. The Animals' sound is just raw, and it's do check out that Oakland Coliseum gig. It's up on YouTube, I think.
The Oakland Coliseum,
1977. Yeah,
there we go. People are recommending that you listen to Guthrie Govan. I imagine you've heard Guthrie.
Sure.
Amazing player.
Yeah.
Well, we're a little over, but of course, we burned up 10 minutes on the front end. If people had a couple more questions, we could do them. If not, we will. It's getting late, actually, in Oslo. Well, not for a musician, you know. No. You're going to put the headphones back on and go back to work, right? Yeah. TCM is reminding it's Oakland Alameda is the show I think that he's talking about. So, all right. Well, it looks like people are going to dinner. So again, Bjorn, thanks so much for doing this. I'm thrilled. I apologize for the technical difficulty up front. If I end up making the Black Strat video, maybe we can get back on and do this hang again.
Sure, I'd love to.
All right. Thanks everybody else for being here. Thanks to Bèvé. Everybody click the like button on your way out. And really enjoyed this, even with that hiccup in the front end. I'm kind of getting used to all the technical difficulties as part of life. So I'm going to move this so I can do this. And I'll see everybody. New video coming next week, and then live stream after that. Take care. Bye-bye.